You've been Googling again. Your search history shows a train of thought that goes from project manager certifications to, is PMI's project management body of knowledge relevant for digital project managers? To, are project managers still relevant? And all the way to, what is the future of project management? Your existential dread is starting to show. But there's something you need to know that you might not already know, and that is this. There's a project management revolution underway. Want to know more about it and how to prepare for it? Well, then just keep listening. Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. My name is Galen Low with the Digital Project Manager. We are a community of digital professionals on a mission to help each other get skilled, get confident, and get connected so that we can amplify the value of project management in a digital world. If you want to hear more about that, head over to thedigitalprojectmanager.com. All right, today we are going to get an insider's perspective into how the 7th edition, the most recent edition of Project Management Institute's Project Management Body of Knowledge came to be, as well as some of the signals it's sending about what's in store for the future of project management at large. So with me today is Mr. Jesse Fewell, a project pioneer, renowned author, founder of the Agile Certified Practitioner certification, and co-contributor to the latest incarnation of the PMI's Project Management Body of Knowledge. Jesse, thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
Oh my gosh, this is my kind of people, my kind of talk. I'm loving the chance to talk shop about what's going on in the world of projects.
I love it, and I love the conversations we've been having in recent weeks. I know you've got a lot of thoughts, perspectives, opinions, and kind of that inside track of what's been going on with the movers and shakers of project management. So hopefully we can dig into that. But first of all, I just have to say, wow. So what an impressive list of credentials I have in front of me. Your Agile Practice Guide has been translated into, I think, 11 languages. It's been read by probably over 500,000 people.
It's something like that. And that's the power of what happens when you raise your hand to volunteer to be a part of something that's bigger than you. And you hook the rope on the speedboat, and then you just try not to drown as you go along. Man, I got to tell you, I'm blessed, #blessed, because, when you get out there, and this is actually a bonus career tip for anyone who's listening. If you want to get ahead in your career, get involved in your profession outside the office. For me, it was volunteering with the Project Management Institute, and then getting involved with Scrum Alliance, and then local meetups. For you, it might be something else, but those created the opportunities for me to be involved in those things. That sounds super impressive, but I was just at the right place at the right time with the right people. So you got to create your own luck if you want to get ahead.
Isn't that the truth? We're also kind of squirreled away in our jobs and getting ahead in our careers, but the people who are doing the things that you're doing, like we need them. We need people to be able to kind of step outside of the box a little and do something for, the broader, I don't want to say greater good. Yeah, I'll say greater good, right? I mean, it's volunteering time and energy to facilitate and implement something that would otherwise be really difficult to get going.
Even if it's just like finding out what's going on in your profession, getting out there, going to a meetup, going to a conference. Right now, this week, as we're filming this, the Global Agile Conference is sponsored by the Agile Alliance. Every year is being hosted in Nashville as we speak. And it's the first time it's happened in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you find out what's going on. What do I, as a professional, need to be aware of? What are the changes happening that might impact my career? And so we've done a lot of that homework for all of you listening. So you buckle up and listen in, because we got some good insights to share with you today.
I love that theme, right? Change and staying with your finger on the pulse, like globally, with your people, with your community, with your profession. It's not something that's static. A lot of people I talk to, they're like, yeah, project management doesn't change that much. And I'm like, tell you what, how much time you got?
Or project management. So like 2000, project management's dead, isn't it?
Isn't it dead?
Okay.
I want to hear, I was like, where do I start? But what I actually want to hear is that origin story of what you said. You said you're the right person at the right time. You've been sewn into the Project Management Institute for some time. You've done things like just opening the door into Agile for a lot of practitioners around the world. But like, what is that story? What is the anecdote of you getting involved with PMI?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So my role This was in 2007. I was working as a project manager at Marriott International Headquarters in Bethesda, Maryland. I was literally in the basement. That's where my cubicle was. It was one of those cloth paneled cubicles where you would push pin a photo of your family there, right? And I'm working there in the basement, and I got approval to take a week off to go to the locally hosted Global Agile Conference I just mentioned. 2022 is happening in Asheville. Well, 2007 it was in DC, and I got to listen to this project management luminary named Mike Griffiths. And the talk was like Agile for the PMP or something like that. And I'm like, hey man, that's right up my alley. Let me go check it out. And it was a great talk. I went up to him afterwards. I said, man, thanks so much for that. I really like the idea of creating like a formal community inside the Project Management Institute's 1 million members that are focused on Agile methods and Agile stuff like that. How can we make that happen? And he's like, well, I'm actually a little bit busy. I'm on the board of directors for the Agile Leadership Network and the board of directors for the Agile Alliance. I'm also currently lecturing at PMI Seminars World. I'm a little bit, how about you do it? And I'm like, bro, no, chill. Like, I am a nobody. I'm a project manager working in the basement of Marriott. I don't know anything about this. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm an open vessel. I'll make the first phone call. So I made a phone call, and I found out that there was a formal process for creating a formal community, and all I needed to do was drum up some interest. And I said, oh, you mean you want me to go contact technologists to see whether they're interested in forming a community about doing things differently than the old-fashioned way? All right, hold my beer. And then before we know it, it's Agile 2009 at Chicago at the conference, and we're launching the PMI Agile Community of Practice. It was the first one of the formal virtual communities that now are taking the shape of projectmanagement.com. And because of that, I was invited to help design a certification. Because of that, I was invited by the Scrum Alliance to be one of their licensed trainers. Because of that, I got invited to found a global consulting arm in Bangalore, India, and so on and so on. And all I did was go to a conference, talk to the speaker, and say, sure, I'll make the first phone call. And it all snowballed from there. So that's the story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's incredible. And I imagine, you know what, just the advice that you shared at the beginning, right? A lot of people would say, haha, thanks, Mike Griffin. No, I ain't got time for that. But kudos, you took the initiative, and opportunity is there to create these communities within our craft. Not to say that everyone will necessarily, drop into that same story and that's what they'll live, but the opportunities are there, it seems, with a little bit of initiative. That's so cool.
They are. They really are. It's really just a matter of choosing what's your preferred channel. Is it the virtual meetups, which now are the de facto post-pandemic reality, and now we're having people collaborate across countries for topics of interest? And is it the next conference? Is it a training class outside of the office? Is it maybe asking your boss for a tour of duty at a different department for 6 to 12 months? Just getting involved and seeing what else is out there, it's huge.
And then obviously that road also led to the PMBOK. I'm going to affectionately call it the PMBOK because I don't want to say project management body of knowledge every time for the next few minutes for the rest of this conversation. But you actually have been a contributor, and specifically I wanted to talk about the 7th edition, the latest edition as of recording. How did you get involved in being one of the people contributing to the PMBOK?
Well, remember Mike? So Mike Griffiths was one of the core members of the 6th edition and invited me to help write the Agile content that was included in there. And then afterwards, he was the co-chair for the 7th edition and invited me to apply to be on the core team. It's a selected process, and there's very specific criteria, particularly around making sure that there's representation from multiple industries, multiple countries. So it was really by virtue of having established relationships in the industry with people who invite you or challenge you to put your name out there. I read a post recently, I think it was CIO magazine, that said that one of the recommendations for moving your career forward is to have sponsors, not just mentors, but sponsors. who will go out on a limb for you. And the only way that happens is if you invest the time to find those relationships. And what I notice with sponsors and mentors, and I consider Mike Griffiths to be like definitely a mentor, 2 to 3 laps ahead of me at every step of the way. He's written more books than me and all of that. Shout out to Mike. But I could see that he was somebody that was 2 to 3 laps ahead of me, and I wanted to kind of follow along. And as he grew, I grew. So when you have those sponsors who get that big executive job and you've got the 5-year relationship with them, they might say, hey, I'd like you to go ahead and apply for head of PMO.
Mm-hmm.
I finally got my first executive role. It only took me 10 years. We've known each other for 5. I think you'd be a good shot at it, but I can't just give it to you. You got to earn your way in. That's all you need is the crack and the opening. And so that's how I got into the project right after it had just suffered or encountered a significant pivot. So I got to see the immediate aftermath of a complete reinvention of what the project was supposed to be about. But then I got to be a part of the ride through the rest of the way.
Let's dive into that pivot. What was this big pivot? Are we allowed to talk about it?
Yes. This is the whole point. So I'm going to say the 5th edition was something like 600 pages in 2012. I remember I was in India when it came out. And then there was the 6th edition was 800 pages. And it was like you could draw, I actually have this in my PowerPoint. You could draw a graph based on which edition was the next one, and it bumped up by another 200 pages. And so there were a couple of things that were happening right around 2019 when this started to kind of percolate. One of them was, all right, it's time for the 7th edition, regularly scheduled refresh. By 2019, Agile been around officially for 18 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And the 6th edition acknowledged that was one way of doing things. But now it's 2019, and we're finding there are a lot of people that are moving on beyond Agile, beyond lean startup, beyond DevOps, beyond design thinking. And where they're being a lot bit more dynamic in what practices they bring to their projects and their products and their initiatives. And so then they started reaching out to the community, all the project managers across the world, workshops in 5 different continents, and asked them, so what would you say is the most important advice you would give to any project manager? In fact, what advice would you give to your younger self? And what came back was not follow the 44 processes, implement all the templates, governance. That's not what came back. What came back was more like some foundational project management principles, like be a leader. You're a project manager. You're not a paper pusher. Lead them. Another one is build a team. These aren't just resources that you move around like pawns on a chessboard. These are people, and you need to lead them as build a team. Another one is use systems thinking. No project is an island unto itself. It's part of an ecosystem, and you need to understand those dependencies, and you got to be open-minded about where the project leads and where it goes. And it turns out there was like a solid dozen of these that started to percolate out from the actual practitioners in the field. That was the second thing. And the third thing is, are we looking at 1,000 pages? Are we looking at a 1,000-page management standard? Like, what? Does that even make sense? Also, as soon as we print this thing, it's going to be stale. I don't know. Anybody heard of this thing called the internet? Where you can put some of this stuff online, and then you can search it, and then you can update it. And so all of those things started coming to a head where we were seeing more change in the marketplace with how projects were being done. We found that the old way of describing the state of practice was now no longer sustainable and needed to pivot to a blended distribution channel of both print and digital. And so all of that came to a head, and when they realized we need to rethink this thing. And that's about when I jumped on board.
What a great time to jump on board after they've gone through all of that. And yeah, for our listeners, just to underscore what Jesse's saying here, the 7th edition of the PMBOK is a pretty dramatic departure. And I think it's like a quite positive and exciting departure. It was a light read. I did my PMP. Let's see, I studied the 5th edition. I'm glad to have skipped the 6th edition now that what you said was they added 200 pages. And when I sat down for the seventh edition, I was preparing myself. I'm dating myself here, but anyone who used to get encyclopedia sets and you just get like the addendum every year, they're like, oh, we found a new creature. This species of spider. And you just have this extra book that you just stack on the end. Like, that's what I was kind of expecting. I was like, okay, fifth edition plus sixth edition plus whatever they're adding to the seventh edition. And it was a completely different experience to read it. I think I got through it in a week, and I'm not a fast reader. And there was so many things that I was nodding about, and things that, at the Digital Project Manager, principles that we really like to champion, that took away that stiffness of what I hear from a lot of people who do their PMP. And they're like, I did my PMP and I've got all these processes and I've got all these templates, and do I have to use all of them? And like, this is really, it's really hard. Like, no one wants to do all the things that it says in the book.
And you don't need to.
Yeah, it turns out nobody was doing it.
No.
I love that.
So it was indeed a real fundamental shift.
And then, I mean, post pivot, like, where do you go from there? I mean, you basically have to, it sounds like you threw the book out.
Threw the book out. Well, I mean, there's a couple of specific changes that are worth mentioning. One is that project management is no longer about deadlines and budgets. There's a cover story on the Harvard Business Review at the end of last year, where an entire insert called Better Project Management. So if you were to Google HBR, Better Project Management, then you'll find that there's a post by former PMI chairman, Antonio Nieto Rodriguez, that makes the claim that projects are the catalyst for the 21st century economy. The projects, as opposed to business operations. And I studied operations research in college, and I was like, yeah, this is what management is. It's about efficiencies of operations. And he's like, no. That's no longer going to cut it anymore. We need more disruptive innovation. We need more infrastructure build out. We need more. And projects project us into the future. That's where the word comes from. And so it's no longer about deadlines and budgets. And so one of the big shifts and one of the challenges is you have an entire profession that's used to their knowledge areas of human resource management, scope management, time management, integration management. And they got their ITTOs, my process input, my tools and techniques, and my process output. No CXO cares about any of that. They don't care about any of that. They want to know, what is the value you bring as a project leader to the table? And those are now moving away from knowledge areas, competencies, arguably, to domains of performance, also outcomes. So for example, an executive who wants to have that economic boost is going to say, okay, you know what, project manager, we've got a charter, we've got some people, we got some funding, but this thing is super volatile. It could go in any direction. I don't know what to do with that. Are you trained in managing change, project manager? Okay, watch me go. Or another one is, this project has so many stakeholders. It's a government project and everyone's got an opinion and nobody is qualified to give an opinion except that they're voters. And so what we need is a project manager to somehow corral all of that. Do you know anything about stakeholder management, project manager? So what we're doing is we're re-articulating the value proposition of the profession. The profession is not about doing work. The profession is about those 8 core value propositions and performance domains around reducing risk, creating clarity from a plan out of chaos, managing, navigating uncertainty, and all of those particular, like creating value with the investment that's being made. It's not just about getting work done. It's making sure that there's an ROI. That's right, project manager. Your job is to includes paying attention to ROI. So the fundamental value proposition is even more now today than it has been over the last few decades, just by nature of the workplace that we're in.
No, I love that. And I love what I see in it is this bridge being built. I always felt like the project management body of knowledge, rightfully so, made a lot of sense to project managers and became this language that project managers could talk about. But outside of that sphere, it was like, what are you talking about? Inputs and outputs? Like, what are you going to do for me? What's in it for me? And I love the emphasis on value creation and leadership, which is something that I 100% agree with. Anyone who reads the material on the Digital Project Manager on our website, that we are all about really amplifying that value and not being perceived as a paper pusher and not aspiring to be a paper pusher, because there's so much more that we can do. And exactly what you said, people are like, oh, do you know anything about that? Hold my beer, right? Because we do, but people are just finding out that we know about this, because we've been calling
Exactly.
it a thing for a long time. And now everyone's like, oh, you mean you can help me navigate change and build adoption and, corral people and build consensus and make this go well and de-risk it? Oh, yes, that's what I would like. I'd like that, please. So,
Yeah.
very interesting shift. I love that project economy thing.
Yeah. And that project economy, that's one part of it. Another part of it is that you mentioned the bridge building between the secret handshake society of project managers, talking about critical path method and, risk register. And, that's our own language, our own lingo. And it makes us feel like the Knights of the Round Table, like the Knights Templar, we know our secret handshakes.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happening now in the industry is that we're seeing that the complexity of projects expands the capacity of any single project manager's brain to contain. And that project management now is becoming a team sport. And so what we need an official standard that's consumable by people other than project managers. So I'm looking at some data coming from a recent project management study, Global Trends in Project Management, and said, I'm looking at this, quoting it right now, 86% of all projects involve multiple office locations.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's more complexity. 70% of PMs say the majority of projects require collaboration outside of their own department, outside of their own environment. And it's even more complicated than that, because there's an ecosystem of dependencies, right? And so what this all is reflecting down to is, number one, projects are no longer islands unto themselves. They're part of a value delivery ecosystem. And number two, project management's a team sport. Those estimates, they better not be coming from you because you're not doing the work. Those requirements, they better not be coming from you because they got to come from the sponsors who want it. And so that's just a couple of examples of how you as a project manager really need to start developing some collaborative skill sets, inviting people to the table, because the projects, not only are they the economic engines that we've talked about, but they're also the linkage of all of this systems complexity to where we need more bodies involved in project management.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think it's a really exciting blur. We were having a conversation in our community, in our Slack group, about this. And yeah, there is a lot of blur happening around project management. Who does it? What is the skill set? How is it different than managing like a product lifecycle? How is it different from operations? And I think, what you're saying there is really resonating in the sense that, hey, in this day and age, every organization, they need that propulsion engine to do stuff that is different than operations, or a different mindset than operations, even if it is kind of blending with operations, like it's just project over project over project. But what it comes down to is that it's about focused collaboration and like an investment of focused energy to do a thing. And I think in the old world, we're kind of like, great, everyone's doing operational stuff and they're working on these projects off the side of their desks. So we need a project manager to like just have them do other work that then feeds into a project, rather than actually everyone should have an understanding of how projects are delivered in some way, shape, or form, because we are working together, we are collaborating on this thing, and it's not necessarily just a little.
Who could they go to help them understand how projects work? Who could advise them and inform them in basic English, not PM lingo, but in basic English? Can you explain to me, how do we build a schedule out of all of this chaos? Okay, well, I'm glad you asked, because, it used to be that when it came to estimates, I would record and sometimes generate expert judgment assessment. But now, today, I've expanded my skill set and my roster to let's facilitate a team-based discussion about this. Thanks for coming to me, because I'm the one that's formally trained on how to do this as a project manager. I think some people are concerned that it's minimizing the contribution that a project manager can bring when we start opening the table up to other participants. And I think it puts you in even more of a spotlight because now more people are going to come to you to help them rather than coming to you just to give them status.
Right. Yes. Yeah, exactly. I agree in the sense that like it's an elevation, not a threat. And if more people understand project management, there will still be a need for like a delivery leader, a project leader. It won't be as flat. Projects just can't be, and especially with concurrent projects, it just, it needs that leadership. I will circle back on that because I want to circle back later about something we were talking about, the informal project manager.
Oh,
But for the time being, I would say it's an elevation and not a threat. But I did want to pause along the way and ask you something because you said something very interesting that I was always quite keen to understand more about, which is that it's not the PM lingo anymore. And I think
ah,
some of our listeners might be like, well, why didn't you do that before? Like, why didn't we simplify the semantics before? But like, what was different in the process about how the new body of knowledge was written, kind of to get into that accessible language?
that's a really good point because it was a methodical decision process. So the first thing was the mission. And the mission is to create a standard that reflects the state of industry practice. And the state of industry practice is one that's now more inclusive in project management, where it's not just one person anymore. There's multiple, not even stakeholders, but multiple leaders on a given project that contribute to different. There's senior contributors that are coming in on all of that. So that means that we need a standard that's human readable.
Mm-hmm.
We need a standard that can be readable by somebody that hasn't gone through a lot of process wonky process, nuts and bolts kind of stuff, right? So that was one. And then, so that now the PMBOK guide is no longer targeted just to the project manager, but to anyone involved in projects. That was one. And then the second one was that the charter, we realized that the 13 knowledge areas and the 44 processes, they've always been relatively, they felt, like you said, your word was rigid. Some people called it prescriptive. It was always meant to be tailored, but the fact that we called out those specific knowledge areas and those specific, it felt rigid. And so the way that was justified or explained or framed previously was that it's okay. It might not be for your project. This standard is really targeted to most projects most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a little bit of a way to frame that, you don't have to do human resource management planning as a process all the time necessarily. Well, now we're getting to the point where, you know what, we've got to expand this out. We can't be selective anymore. We need a standard that applies to all projects all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So how about this? How about instead of worrying about your create scope management plan process or make scope management adjustments process, how about this? How about we just have a value proposition of create a plan?
Mm-hmm.
However you go about it. Oh, by the way, here's an entire section on all the tools that you can use to create a plan. Go get some formal training if you want, but as a standard, we're recognizing there are multiple ways to go about creating a plan. And having a plan absolutely creates shared understanding. It articulates alignment on the direction. It creates clarity in the middle of chaos. That adds value to senior leaders. And so those were the two big things that came out of it. One was we discovered that it needs to be for all projects all the time. And it needs to be targeted not to a project manager, but to the project management group or project management team. And so because of that, the decision was made, wait for it, to hire onto the team a professional writer. For the first time in the half century of the Institute's existence, imagine this. We had a professional copywriter involved in putting together the standard. And it was super helpful. It was super helpful because we needed to translate our lingo into English and into conversational Spanish and conversational French and so on and so on. So that was the method behind the madness.
I love that. I love this, as someone, my background's in sort of human-centered design and human-centered digital transformation, and that sort of hey, let's think about the end users and making this inclusive and accessible. And I love that there's that element because I do feel like I've been translating the value of project management for a decade. because people like won't get it if I tell them, the name of that process and the outputs. But they will get it when they say, "Oh yeah, we want to drive an outcome that's valuable, and we need ways of working. We need ways to do this because we need to collaborate effectively."
And yet, ironically, Galen, I find that those of us in that digital world, we can get locked into our own lingo log jam at the same time. Like, so I think the persona analysis mapping that we've done is missing a customer experience element pivot. Because the episode number 5 in the customer experience, and you're just like, what language are you speaking, man? So even we who want to get involved a little bit more user centric can sometimes get lost in our own lingo.
It's a page that we should, take out of the proverbial book, no pun intended, but and apply in our day-to-day lives. I mean, at the end of the day, we're just humans working together to do stuff. A lot of that's going to come down to communication and organization and risk. And I agree. I probably just got lost in my own jargon just there for the past 2 minutes. So.
No, but I was here. You're good. I was just
All right.
I was just making the observation. There's actually a term for it in psychology. It's called the curse of knowledge, and that the more you know, the more you assume everyone else knows. Well, it's totally obvious that we need a work breakdown structure here. And everyone's like, "Can you say that again? A work breakdown structure." What was that? That was my first ever internet blog post coming out of PM boot camp. I was so proud of the fact that I knew what it was. I wanted the whole internet to know I'm going to create a blog. And this is my first post. It's a human thing. It's a human thing to get lost in our lingo. And that's why it's helpful to make sure that there are people who are skilled in getting to the fundamental story.
Mhm.
What is it that we're trying to say here?
I love that. And coming back to that reversal, right? Coming from, like, I always have perceived the PMBOK as like a toolkit, right? It's got some tools in there that I can use. And that was my way of interpreting that, it was kind of like, here's what will work for most projects, but also it might not work for every project. So I was like, aha, this is just a box of tools. And that was useful and fine, to be honest. But now it's like, what is the art of choosing the right tools? That is much more like beneficial and a recognition of the state of the industry, reflecting the state of the craft and the industry and how business and projects are being done. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's even stats in that trends report, which I thought were kind of interesting and surprising about how many projects, would self-report as either having no methodology or using some kind of hybrid methodology, which I'm envisioning that interview, right? They're like, "Oh, tell us about your project methodology." And I'm sure someone said like, "That's a hodgepodge of a bunch of methodologies." And they're like, "Yep, let's put that as hybrid." There's like so much work and projects getting done, and they're getting done. And what made them succeed or fail is not whether or not they used that process and had the right input and had the right output. That may have been a contributor. But what made the project a success is, did it deliver value and did it deliver the outcomes that everyone was hoping to get in terms of the project objectives? And I was like, oh,
One way to say it might be that compliance is not the engine to success, but it might be a project requirement. So I might need to be compliant with some core standards, some regulatory expectations, but compliance to process is not going to prevent mistakes, and it's not going to guarantee alignment or momentum. I'm going to have to pull another tool out of the toolbox in order to overcome this barrier and that barrier. So that was, I think, that's where the industry practice has evolved over the last 20 years. And that's why the Project Management Institute felt a fiduciary responsibility to reflect that, what's happening now is most projects, most of the time, are moving beyond any fixed methodology. And that's what the data is saying right now, is that there isn't any consistent methodology from one project to the next universally, or even in a plurality of projects. So you do what you need to do to get it done, as long as you're consistent with laws and standards and expectations and requirements and within your constraints.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where the industry has evolved.
Yeah, no, I like that. And like some of the conversations that I've seen recently in our community have been like, I've got a friend who does, military construction projects. And like, what's that got to do with a website project that I'm working on? Like, how could they possibly share like a singular approach? Mine's going to last 4 months and my friend's project's going to last 4 years. Like, There's different things, there's different considerations, there's different risks, there's different people to communicate with. Like, what's that got to do? Like, how can there be a singular standard?
That's been actually a source of division, not contention, but maybe silos within the
Hmm.
project management community. I am a construction project manager, or I am a I'm a software project manager, or I am a government project manager. And so you create these little specialty silos. They were specific interest groups. They were formally chartered, incorporated organizations connected to the PMI.
Hmm.
And now they've kind of evolved into more like informal communities and conversation groups where we're pinging ideas off of each other, and we are discovering doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether it's 4 months or 4 years, whether it's a bridge or if it's a website, we need to align on the success criteria. What's the success criteria? How do we measure success? What's the value proposition here? And that's universally across any kind of formal investment that you're making with a project. So that's what's exciting, is that we are beginning now to discover that there are some universal truths that can help reduce some of those mental silos we have of saying, you could never learn anything from me and I can never learn anything from you.
I like that flip. And it does remind me, I did an episode, listeners will know, I did an episode with Brett Harned. We were talking about what makes digital project management different. And I think one of the things he said there is, he's like, it's not like we are hiding and like, everyone's got something to learn from us. It's about knowledge. It's about knowledge sharing and driving a conversation. And like equally, like even coming back to what you said at the beginning, I'm like, yeah, I probably should spend some time in like, if there is a construction project management community, because I bet I've got something to learn from them, even just like going across industry. And yes, maybe it's not as rigid, like, oh, all projects must be run the same. It's more about, hey, as we do a certain type of project, we learn these things and we build these techniques, but also, check it out. Like maybe it's going to be useful for you.
I'll give you a concrete example. I
Hmm.
was working with one tech team that was creating a software applications for a maintenance shop to use. And these people, they were maintaining like transportation equipment, like locomotives and whatnot. And so they had these kiosks in the maintenance shops, and they were deploying new capability every 2 weeks. Check me out, digital, chirp, chirp, chirp. And all those unionized shop workers filed a grievance. Like, you're coming at us too hot and heavy with your digital Silicon Valley skinny jean nonsense. We're blue hat serious workers. And, can you at least just do a scope freeze, a feature freeze for 3 months, or people could get trained up on how this silly tool works? And, and by the way, all these Silicon Valley people with your KPIs about total hours of screen time and total clicks and engagement, I want my people to spend no more than 60 seconds on this tool so they can go to work. So they had opposite perspectives. And so it gave me, as a digital project manager, a deeper appreciation of persona analysis, because I had never worked with unionized people before. And so that's something that I could have learned a little bit sooner if I had hung out with more construction project managers who were well, let me tell you, there's a lot of a difference between you people and those people. So there's always so much to learn from going across those silos.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. I wanted to circle back on that thing I said, which is the informal project manager. And I was like, interpret it how you will, but I think the popular interpretation is people who are leading and managing projects who do not consider themselves to be project managers, whose role might not be project management solely. And I've seen it happen, and I spent some time in some of the larger consultancies, and I saw this movement towards, okay, well, if it's a really big, complicated project that's high risk, yes, we need a project manager. And maybe there's like, that like enterprise project manager, we'll dip into the EPMO for that. But then other projects were like, oh, you just lead it. It seems straight ahead enough. You're the person who is whatever, the industry consultant, and also please manage the project and make sure, the outcome is solid. And that's kind of been my take on it. And I see it happening more and more. And to your point, reflecting the state of things, it's happening now. And whether you are a project manager thinking that that's a threat, or whether you are not a project manager thinking like, what is this BS? I don't want to have to do this. Like, what do you see for the future there?
So in the global trends report that we're referring to, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to give a link to that as a resource. 43% are saying that in their environment, 43% of project managers are saying that there's no PMO and there's no official methodology in their org. That's almost half. Here's another one. A third of all project managers have no certification at all. They're just being asked, can you run this? In fact, almost a third have no formal PM title at all. I'm just a supervisor. I'm being asked to run this project. Or I'm a product analyst and I'm being asked to run this project. And so that's a lot. That's a significant plurality to say that a third of all project managers have neither formal training nor formal title. And what that points to, I think, is you called it earlier, the blurring of lines. In fact, in that Harvard Business Review piece that I mentioned, 3 articles consuming a couple of dozen pages in the magazine, project manager was not mentioned once. The term project manager was not mentioned once in the article that communicated the value of project management as a global economic catalyst. So then how do you reconcile that? How can you do project management without a project manager? And that's what that's what the new PMBOK guide is reflecting now. It's reflecting that this is a team sport. And we want this to be accessible and usable by regular people. So then where do I go, Galen? Let me ask you, how would you differentiate yourself given your knowledge, experiences, and credentials? How would you differentiate yourself in this kind of a world where non-PMs are being asked to lead projects and project management is the global catalyst, even though a plurality of us have no formal training or title?
I mean, I think it comes back to that elevation thing, and, call me an elitist, but I feel like that puts me in a position to be the ambassador of project management as a skill set and like leading that and championing the right way of doing it. And I've been teetering on this existential question as part of the digital project manager is, should we be saying, hey, listen, us project managers who might have the title project manager and have been doing project management for some time as project managers, should we now be saying, hey, we know stuff, we can train you all to be better at delivering projects because you're probably going to be asked to do that. There's frankly nothing we can do about it. And if I had to sort of reframe the importance of someone whose title is project manager, I don't think you're obsolete. I think you become the ambassador of project management. And I think if there's like you said, there's not as many in the data. It's like there's fewer PMOs. There's just people kind of running project. It's not like this like office that has centrality and like rigid ways or formal ways or documented ways of doing things. But maybe there's an opportunity to not have, the PMO as we see it today, or, have seen it in the past, but actually, like you said, a community of practice of delivering projects. Good, like,
Yeah.
It's just like, yep, this is my community of practice of delivering projects. Good. And I lead it, right? And I bring people together and we share knowledge and we, we keep tabs on the PMBOK because it says, tailor and, like focus on delivering value and outcomes. And we piece all our knowledge together so that we can keep doing that thing. That's my hope.
I love that approach. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to follow Galen's advice here, and I'm going to become an ambassador for project management, because you're right. What happens is when we start inviting, I'm going to get like cynical here. We start inviting the riffraff into our profession, then anybody can say that they're managing a project, even though they don't have the title or the training. Well, that just meant that I now shine brighter. I shine brighter now as someone who has had formal training in what this means. And I've made it my job as opposed to my assignment. And if there's more and more people that are being assigned project management responsibilities, I can say, I've actually been to the 5 conferences and I've passed 2 exams. And I can tell you that this methodology is probably not a good fit for this project. I know you read the book and you were excited to use the V model, but the V model is probably not a good fit for right here. And because I've tried it a couple times and okay, tell me more. And now the project manager becomes less of the tight-fisted coordinator of all the activities. And you might find yourself being a project management mentor or a project management coach,
yeah,
or a facilitator of other project managers which
Mhm.
is in many ways what a program manager is,
Mhm.
facilitating the alignment and the facilitating the choices of a project management team. And so now it sounds a lot like a program manager. You just gave yourself a promotion. So I think, yes. So the bottom line is that when the pool becomes dirty, the purest shines brighter.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a challenge, and and this is me being like, hey, I'm challenging you, project managers, to not rely on the standard crutches. Same thing happened with photography, if you recall. You used to have to buy that SLR and spend thousands and thousands of dollars. So if you had money and you were like really technical, then you were the only one who could be a photographer. And then like now you look at your iPhone and it's taking brilliant photos. But I do see amazing photographers on like YouTube and Insta, and they're like, here's a tip, like, get this framing. Don't frame this way. Frame this way. Get your subject to do this. And those finer points, those nuanced things, not the like barrier of entry that was just money, and not the barrier of entry that was just equipment, or the barrier of entry that was just the certification in this case. It's
Yes.
like now it's going to be the challenge is the stuff you're made of, the stuff that is stylistically what makes you a great project manager. Those are the things that are going to come out into sharp relief. And you need to hone those, and you need to talk about them, and you need to be there for the people and show up for the people who are just starting to take photos with their iPhone. You know what I mean?
I got another example for you, ladies and gentlemen. It's your host, Galen, because the temptation would be, I've got all this knowledge and I got to make sure that I keep it to myself. Because if I don't give anybody, if nobody else has this knowledge, then they'll pay me. They'll pay me for what I know.
Mm-hmm.
Except I can just Google all of that. That's what's changed in the last 2 decades over the course of a few of these PMBOK editions, or the project management world. I can just Google how to run a project. And there are content creators out there ready to fill their minds with nonsense. Galen, he's like, you know what? I'm going to give all this knowledge away with this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, because I know that I am an infinite wellspring of awesome and an infinite wellspring of value that I can provide. Just because I give knowledge doesn't mean it doesn't take a dime away from what I can give to executives, companies, organizations in my profession. So this is my way of tipping the hat to you, Galen, for giving away the knowledge that normal people would say is your differentiator you need to protect and hide.
We paid Jesse for that plug. No, but I think that's I think
Content economy is about, right?
absolutely, yeah, yeah. The thing should not be to guard knowledge. The thing should be to share knowledge and elevate yourself and challenge yourself to not just stay still because you have all this knowledge that you're hoarding, but to actually continue to grow as you share that knowledge. And, like you said about Mike, whose name I got wrong earlier. Sorry, Mike. I said Mike Griffin.
Yeah, Griffin. No,
Yeah,
it's Griffiths.
Mike Griffiths, who, managed, and who knows, maybe you'll outpace him one day. But like, that's a great example of saying, hey, yeah, listen, you do it. I'm going to keep, going around the track, and I'll be a couple laps ahead of you, and you just follow behind me. But I'm not going to stop moving. I'm going to keep going. And if you want to come along, and follow behind me, absolutely, let's do it. And I think that's a better perspective on how you can develop this craft, this project management skill set, this project management community, and not just try to be selfish about it, hoard, and try and keep secrets, thinking that that's going to give you job security. It's probably not.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. Love it.
Hey, one last final question. So, having said all this, talking about the informal project management, who should read the PMBOK now?
Well, okay, so the first answer is obvious. If you are a career project manager, you've been doing this for a while, and you've already been through at least one other version of the PMBOK guide, maybe you even took that PMP test or a couple of others, this is what you do. You're absolutely well served by reading this thing. First of all, this might be the first time that you've drawn line of sight between being a project manager and being a project leader. This might be the first time that you've been able to actually take a look at a deeper conversation about what it means to be the center of gravity on a particular initiative. So number one, that's the first people that should read it. And then number two, I would invite people to read it. There was one project manager at a local PMI chapter who asked me this question, and he said, I'm a little bit overwhelmed by what do I share with people, because I've got a whole bunch of crazy stakeholders, and should I be showing them this thing? should I show them how the sausage is made? Should I show them how this is? And to which point I said, probably not. Probably only if they ask. So the second group of people I think should check this out is people who are thirsty for what it is that makes that project over there so successful. What is it that makes Galen so successful as a project manager? I'm curious what that is. I might want to read this 7th edition to find out a little bit more about it. I also would recommend it for leaders who want to build a project management competency, like you mentioned, that community of practice. So if you're the one who's hosting and facilitating it, reading this might give you a sense of the lay of the land so that you can select what's the next monthly topic that we want to talk on, or who's the next guest speaker we might want to invite. So those are a couple of examples, but just because it's now human readable and just because it's targeted for all projects all the time doesn't mean that this is necessarily a required reading for everybody. It's really, it's something that we want to offer people who opt in. If you're opting into the world of projects for whatever reason, because it's your profession, got to do it, because you're curious, or because you want to build something around it, those would be the 3 personas that come to my mind.
I absolutely love that. And I don't know if we touched on it earlier, but 5th edition, 600 pages, 6th edition, 800 pages, 7th edition?
Less.
It was a breeze to read.
Yeah, it's like a couple hundred.
Awesome. So for anyone who's been like, nope, that ain't for me, and even if it was, I'm not reading that much, it's not as much. And it's pretty well copywritten, and it's got a lot of great ideas in there that are applicable to all projects, not just some projects. So I think that's really cool. Jesse, this has been super interesting, really enlightening. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your insights. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. I think there were some things we uncovered there that are really going to make people think. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
I hope so. If you listened all the way through, thank you. And I hope that we gave you at least a nugget or two that can help you move forward with more confidence.
There you go. Thanks again, Jesse.
Anytime.
So what do you think? Is the PMBOK relevant to you as a digital project manager? Why or why not? Tell us a story. Have you ever gotten into an argument about the PMBOK? What are some of the most contentious aspects of this body of knowledge? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hone your skills as a strategic project leader, come and join our collective. Head over to thedigitalprojectmanager.com/membership to get access to a supportive community that shares knowledge, solves complex challenges, and shapes the future of our craft together. From robust templates and monthly training sessions that save you time and energy, to the peer support offered through our Slack discussions, live events, and mastermind groups, being a member of our community means having over 1,000 people in your corner as you navigate your career in digital project delivery. And if you like what you heard today, please subscribe and stay in touch on thedigitalprojectmanager.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.